now start the webinar and start welcoming people. So the people are now coming into our webinar room. And today is a very special day for all of us. It's very special because we have Santrupt with us, Dr. Santrupt Misra. Why is Santrupt Misra special? For many reasons. One, he chose to invest in his own education of an unusual kind. He chose to do a PhD and work with industry. He chose to switch over from a multinational company like Unilever and joined an Indian conglomerate, Aditya Birla Group. He chose to stay with Aditya Birla Group for a long time. He chose to take up the challenge of transforming himself from an extremely competent human resource professional to a business leader. And Santrupt, one of the things I admire most about you is that when your employees at large, both current employees and ex-employees, when they are asked to name a mentor or a leader whom they consider as a role model, many of them would name you. And so this has been, it's quite something for people to say something in your presence which is positive. But behind your back, when nobody is listening, when people on a one-to-one conversation name somebody they look up to, so you are often named. So Santrupt, so I'm so delighted that we have you with us on this forum. And thank you very much for accepting this invitation.
Thank you, Anil. Good evening, and thank you for inviting me. It's good to see you. I wish we were meeting more in person than the virtual mode, but I presume we don't have a choice. But thank you for saying such nice things. And I think those people who said good things is their kindness, I suspect, you know. But it's good always to know that somewhere one has been able to touch people's lives in some meaningful way.
Thank you, Santrupt. Santrupt, in this series, my opening question is always, when you look at all the things that you have done in your life and all things that have been done through you, what do you recall are some of the special moments when you and your colleagues and you and the community, you and others, were at your happiest best, when you did something special or something special happened through you? What are those moments that stand out for you as the happiest?
Well, I think, you know, happiness is a matter of personal criteria, you know, how you look at things. And if I look back on, let's say, if I perhaps discount first 5 years of my life as somewhere the memory is hazy, and you're talking about half a century's memory today, you know. So if I look back, I think two kinds of events, you know, one set of events where I have been able to make a meaningful difference, either to individuals or institutions, or something that I have applied myself to. However small or large, if I've been able to be of service to somebody, support to somebody, been able to do something for somebody, I think those have been one of the great moments. The other moments have been where I have been able to overcome some tough challenge, competition, odds to achieve something, even if it is for myself. But in doing so, I have been able to set a higher bar or a standard and been able to inspire other people with that act of doing something. You know, you refer to some of those in your introductory comment. For example, when I was switching from HR to take a business responsibility, from first business responsibility to the second one I have taken now in last 2 years, it was simply not only for me. What was always at the back of my mind was about making it successful for HR community as a whole, so that others feel inspired to be able to make that switch, able to take that risk. So it was not always I was as if doing it for myself. There was also this whole motive of setting a new tone and tenor for a community. So I think those two kinds of things where I can give examples if you like, but things where I have been able to serve others or create some value for others. And second is where against odds I have been able to create some achievement for myself.
So Santrupt, so these are the themes that resonate in your heart when you describe these two. Would you like to name one such moment when something special happened?
Well, actually, I can name many moments, not one. The joy of doing something for someone I discovered when I was in undergrad. We had a 2-year honors graduation program. When I was in year third year, and there was a 4th-year student senior to me 1 year who was visually challenged, and he asked me to write for him an exam, a university exam. And I was supposed to write what he said to me, and it presented both an ethical dilemma for me and an opportunity for me, because I was the topper of my batch. I was supposedly classically an outstanding student who always kind of topped my batch, so I could write anything. And even though I was a year junior to him, perhaps I knew as much or more because of the amount I would have read. So, confronting that ethical dilemma, that whether I should only write what he says or me write a little more, the world doesn't lose out if somebody who's visually challenged and gets a few marks and feels good about it because doesn't have something. And then there was this more sadistic invigilator who made it a point to stand right in front of me because he knew that I was an outstanding student in Devonshire College. I was very prominent in debates and wanted to make sure that I write exactly what this candidate is dictating to me, And going through that struggle and occasionally finding a moment to write a few points that I knew would add to the color and flavor of what this answer could have been was a great experience of both personal challenge, turmoil, and desire to help. And also that moment where you appreciated that what gifts of sight mean for all of us that we take so granted, and how difficult it is for someone having a disability of any kind, and that process had a story behind it. When I was in class 6 or 7 in Bhubaneswar, we used to live, every, I think it used to be weekly or fortnightly or whatever, I can't recall now. We used to live at a place where there was a school for blind about a furlong away. And a relatively young person in those days used to come making his stick noise. He used to sell Chanda Mama and Reader's Digest and books like that. At night he used to come. And he would do cut on the, he would make noise on the gate, to draw attention. And I used to buy Chanda Mama from him. And I don't know if that had a deep impact on my life. Somehow I had this connect with this individual who used to come in the night without, having an eyesight to sell and make a living while being in the hostel. And the moment I got that opportunity to write this individual, that was such a great moment and feeling. That was one of those, moments where the first kind where I could do something for somebody, Personal achievement terms, I never studied in an English language school. I always learned in Odia medium in Odisha. And when I came to college, first time I learned in English. So when I went for an admission test in JNU, in School of International Studies, and I topped the selection and I scored 29 out of 30 in an interview, competing with students from Delhi's famous colleges and other parts of the country. And I felt a joy that, my English was my self-made English. It was not a kind of trained and taught English. That not only I could answer their questions, I could answer them so effectively that they felt good enough to give me 29 out of 30, which I was told was a record in JNU admission for a very long time. I felt that it set a standard that your language proficiency did not really determine what you could achieve. And therefore, today, when I see the Chinese students world over, and many years later, I found I was sharing the office while I was doing second PhD in England with 3 Chinese students, and one of whom, opening sentence, he told me that, would you like a cup of tea? Now, I thought it is my poor English that I didn't understand there could be something called a cup of tea. And then I realized perhaps his English is inferior than mine, that he hasn't understood it's a cup of tea. And I saw and watched him in 3 years. Not only he completed a PhD, he found an associate professor's job in Judges Institute of Management in Cambridge. And he had become very fluent in English. Whereas in his beginning, I used to see that he could not read a book second sentence without referring to a English to Chinese dictionary. So, so overcoming a barrier to, set a standard or an achievement has been the other set of kind of memories that have stayed with me. And there are many stories of that kind, but each one of them have kind of built in more confidence and given me the faith that people from any background, if they're working hard, they have something to offer. And maybe in my human resources profession, I could find more people. And sometimes I have been in campus selections where in a group discussion of 40 people, 30 people sometimes, somebody doesn't speak anything. And for some reason, intuitively, it has told me he has something to contribute. And I asked him to speak something. He spoke, I shortlisted him, I selected him, and the guy joined the company, did very well in his career. Somebody who was relatively hesitant, shy. So, a lot of those experiences helped me in later life, perhaps to kind of identify hidden talent, perhaps.
How wonderful. Now, when you work in an organization as large and complex as Aditya Birla Group, and when you orchestrate people coming together and doing something special, that could be a source of great amount of joy, because if the large organizations are leveraged as a platform for doing something special, then I think there is also that great sense of satisfaction and joy in that context. So what would you remember amongst the things that you co-created and did with all your colleagues in ABG that stand out for you as some special moment that you were part of?
Well, again, in ABG, this is my 25th year, so silver jubilee, you can call it, And so there have been so many inspiring moments where people have done such terrific things, even during this COVID. We commissioned a new plant and an equipment in Thailand with our engineering and equipment consultants remotely helping us, and we commissioned that. We had never done anything like that, and it's credit to people and their commitment on the side that they did it, Similarly, in history, we have created so many things. For example, christening about 38 of our schools. Today, of course, we have almost 52, 53 schools, 38 of them as Aditya Birla public schools. And, working together and with support of the unit managers, the teachers, the principals, to convert them into unique assets in rural areas and making them comparable to the best schools in India. With fraction of a cost that people pay there for education. Almost out of 48,000 students, about 20,000 get almost free education there. But if you go into our chemistry labs, our physics labs in those schools, they are as good as any leading school in Bombay, Delhi, because we don't think that students in rural schools must feel short charged in terms of infrastructure because they are in a backup beyond the location. So, things of that kind. For example, we today talk about in this pandemic, telemedicine. We introduced telemedicine in our rural units 14 years ago.
Wow.
As a way of connecting our people with best hospitals in India at that point in time. So
Amazing.
In some ways, it was a story of inspiration. We had the vision to believe that digital is the way of future, though there was a live need that existed that obviously best doctors sometimes didn't go there, or sometimes people there have a feeling that if you're a very good doctor, why would you be in not in urban area. Why would you work in a rural hospital? But a lot of people today don't understand the sense of commitment, that you can be committed enough to work with a rural communities hospital rather than be in a kind of urban hospital. So we introduced telemedicine some 14 years ago in the group, so, there are lots of works, Gyanodaya Leadership Center, you've been there, you've taught there to many of our people. I think that has emerged as one of the leading corporate universities in the world. In many of the places we get awards, it's because of the collective work my colleagues do, the participants do, the ideas and innovations that start from there. So I think there are dozens and dozens of examples of inspired work that we all do in Aditya Birla Group every day, and we are very proud of that.
Amongst all the things that you have done, and therefore this amazing work has happened, what has this taught you about the things that you particularly do specially well? What are the things that you are conscious that these are Santrupt gifts that have been given to you, and therefore you really need to leverage them to do more good?
I don't know. I think that's a question best put to people who work with me or know me or have had interactions with me. But honestly speaking, I think one is ideation. I can create ideas about anything, what's the future could be. To give an example, right now, I've invited my HR colleagues, about 150 of them. We are working together for our HR strategy for next 3 years. And I've said that we need to be bifocal. We can't get overpowered by this pandemic and remain here and now. There will be a world and life beyond this. So we need to be bifocal in terms of thinking of today, tomorrow, and the day after and beyond. So let's craft a new HR strategy. We call it avant-garde HR strategy. And what could the elements of that be? So I think ideas is one part of it. Many of the things we have built, particularly on culture, HR, development side, I think they may not be exact representation of my idea, but certainly have been inspired somewhere with an idea of mine of starting something very small, and they've acquired a life of their own. Second is about inspiring and marshalling people to commit themselves to doing a job far greater than them and lifting themselves up in terms of their purpose, vision, and not be confined to narrow considerations. I run something called an Aditya Birla Awards for Outstanding Achievement, which has been our Oscars for last 25 years. We draw people from all parts of the group on a volunteer basis, and they come and work for it day and night, literally, for almost 15, 17 days to make it happen with no recognition or reward available to them for doing this. So I think inspired action based on a larger purpose of doing something. I think in my view, these are two things I do well.
Wonderful. Now, each time you envision something and then you do something, when you sit in the quiet silence of your own, talking to your own self, when you sit and give yourself feedback, what is revealed to you about things that are not some things that are naturally given to you, therefore you have to put in extra effort to acquire that? Let me give my own case, just as an example. I know that, for instance, in my own case, I did not study higher level maths in my school. And so I had to consciously put more effort to become competent in the quantitative side of the business, which I put in and acquired a certain competence in that area. So as an example.
Well, many actually, as you said about my introduction, I have been in industry, I have been academia. You forgot to say I taught in Tata Institute for 5 years.
Yes.
I did 2 PhDs, changed all of this. So all of that involved learning several things. And as my chairman, Mr. Birla, who gave me this responsibility of carbon black business 11 years ago, he told me, you'll find yourself at the deep end of the pool as far as finance is concerned. I said, yes, I know that, but I will prepare myself. And I did that. And in some ways, one of my colleagues, CFOs who retired now some time back, he one day told me, Dr. Mishra, you are becoming dangerously knowledgeable about finance. That's the ultimate compliment I could get from a CFO who's dyed in wool CFO. So, many things, this morning, for example, I had a presentation from a bunch of young people about something they had done on LinkedIn. And I was telling them that the level of proficiency you have in LinkedIn, I have a profile on LinkedIn. I don't visit very regularly. It's been created by some of my colleagues. I don't know much about how to do what you do on the LinkedIn. So digital is an area that I often, I looked after the group's CIO, reported into me for 5 years. And I used to interact with my colleagues from IT. I learned a lot from them about IT. I'm not a chemical engineer, and 2 businesses that report to me are all chemical engineering. And I go there with young engineers to ask, why, what is this piece of equipment called? What does it exactly do? So I think there are a lot of things that I do not know in terms of knowledge. In terms of skill, I believe that because my mind works very fast, I need to slow it down very deliberately when I'm listening and interacting with somebody to say, okay, hold on, my friend, listen to what the guy is saying. See that that's the right problem you are defining. So I need to slow my mind down many times, and I got to put an effort to do that. I think other thing is perhaps long time I've learned on a few occasions that I can be very snappy and quick about a decision. Is again about my mind rushing. And I believe that I could slow down myself a little bit before taking a decision. And maybe I've deliberately slowed it down sometimes to say, okay, this is a complex issue. Could I deal with different ways? Can I sleep over it if there is time? So I think, in many ways, slowing myself down has been a challenge, bringing a degree of calmness to me. I inherited a lot of great things from my dad. And one of the not so great things perhaps I inherited with this whole issue of speed from him, And fortunately and unfortunately in Aditya Birla Group, speed is one of our values. So to that extent, I'm consistent with it, but I need to tell myself that speed is not haste. So I need to slow down.
Wonderful. A lot of times, Santrupt, in our lives, sometimes things don't quite turn out to be what we had envisioned. Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes there is failure. And the way we learn from that and handle that is something which is a real gift. Would you like to recall any such moment when you were particularly challenged because things didn't turn out to be the way you had envisioned? Some issue came in your life which was completely unexpected, and how you dealt with it?
Well, actually, again, there are, obviously, if you work for a long time, you have many issues of that kind, For example, the 9/11, no, not 9/11, the Arab Spring, when the entire Egypt was on boil under the Arab Spring and there was hardly any law and order. I had from the group about 100 employees and their families in Egypt. And I went through a lot of turmoil at that point in time. What course of action to take? Do I call all my expat colleagues back, their families back? Do I leave them there? I call them back. My colleagues in Egypt would think that at good time you were here and you went out when slightest of challenges came. I leave them there. There could be risk of life because there were challenges at that point in time. I think that's a time where I believe that not everybody at the plant, employees particularly, would necessarily be influenced by the fervor of the revolution. And I went wrong on that. I did find that there were a section of employees that were impacted by the fervor of revolution. and they mistook the revolution as a license to do anything within the factory. And some very good folks, gentle folks that I knew, I discovered a very different face of them, because these are colleagues I've been meeting for long, many years as HR head, even though I was not the head of the business. So I think that was a classic situation where my calculation was going wrong. I retrieved very quickly. I made sure that we kind of brought a sense of discipline and a sense of understanding about their role within the factory being different from their role as a citizen outside, or their freedom to do what they want to do in their own time. But that is somewhere I think I went very wrong in my understanding of my colleagues and my view of what Egyptian national character at that time could have been. But again, the good thing was I could rely on a lot of colleagues who thought differently and came to play a more effective role locally there and step forward to bring the issues under more saner control. But I think judging people from a different culture and the impact of a particular event on the psyche of people, I think I went wrong in reading that at that point in time. I like that there are several occasions that have happened, where I would have gone wrong, but always thank God that I have always thought quickly on what other alternative courses I could take to manage this issue better and communicate. And I have always found that relationship built in peace times, trust established, credibility established, always comes to your rescue when you go wrong and you want to fix it right, or other people do not perceive you necessarily that you messed up things, because they see that your credibility then comes to your rescue at that point in time.
Santrupt, there is a statement I heard that life is what happens to you when you are planning something else. And many of us have had also personal challenges to deal with as life happens to us. Is there something that you wish to talk about where you had to go through any such personal challenge and how you faced those aspects in your life?
Well, I think many times in life, my younger days, when I was in class 8, 9, my mother used to have prolonged illness for 9 months. My grandfather was a medical doctor. He took my mother to every possible doctor in Odisha, and we couldn't find any solution to it. And she couldn't retain food, and she had become absolutely frail, and she used to throw up everything she used to eat, and used to get a stomach churn starting 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And my dad used to be teaching at the college, and we were, he was superintendent of a hostel, and we used to live on the first floor, and sometimes from his classroom, he could see the flat. He used to tell us to put a red bucket in case there is an emergency, you leave the class and come. And me and my only sister and my dad used to tell us not to take an exam in a year that we could flunk, because we had gone through so much of medical challenges at home and seeing suffering and pain. We never had time to study. Rather than attend to our mother, we kind of almost felt that we will lose her. And, those 8, 9 months were an excruciating time of seeing your own mother suffer very seriously when you are not so grown up. You are aware and not so self-reliant yet. I've gone through that. Today, when I look at my dad, who was so active at 85, when he's more or less bedridden, a man who had erudition, scholarship, articulate, intelligent, and most of the things that I've learned from him is what I've learned. But today, when I see him bedridden, struggling to speak and say something, and one does reflect on what real true meaning of life is, and that what's different stages. I always read about the 4 stages of life, in Hindu philosophy. But I read about how Gautam Buddha's philosophy evolved around, human suffering, but I have seen it on a fair amount in my life at different stages in my life. And each of them perhaps have brought a more humble and realistic assessment as to what we as human beings can control, cannot control, and how perhaps resilience is a great virtue to have with you, and resilience is something that is beyond capacity to go through a suffering. Resilience is going through the suffering and yet having a sense of direction and a movement and retaining degree of optimism that this too shall pass. And COVID is a situation like that today, and we all need that sense
Yes.
of resilience rather than a sense of resignation.
Yes. So one personal question and then a professional question before we now have questions coming from the audience. Already many
I
people
thought
are
all
giving
these questions were personal questions.
Yeah, I know. And because today we are getting a chance to discover Santrupt, the person behind the work that he does. Santrupt, you told me just before when we were talking, before we went live, that your son recently got COVID. And that must have been a very challenging situation. So how did you and your son and the family deal with this?
Well, fortunately, first of all, my wife and daughter were not here. My wife is in Delhi. My daughter is a doctor in London, and they both were not here. And the moment I got to realize that my son could be infected because he had gone with my driver somewhere, and I realized my driver got infected the previous evening, they had gone. Immediately, I suggested to my son that he remain in quarantine. So he remained there, and we tested him, and he turned out to be positive. Me and my domestic support staff, we quarantined ourselves separately. Fortunately, we live in a duplex in Mumbai, so my son could be isolated down and I was isolated up. So we had to improvise, how to provide food to him outside his door, how to kind of use disposable things, how to all the time keep everything sanitized. So, but thanks to technology, because there was FaceTime and all the other good kind of video-based interactive medium was available. So me, my wife, Falka, and our daughter, Sanidhya, as I said, she's a doctor, so you could connect as many times in a day possible to evaluate the situation, what we would do or not. But again, the spirit of Mumbai was alive. My building people, my society members, and all were very, very supportive. The security guys used to put everything that I needed into the elevator, used to come up and we used to pick it up. And yes, it was lonely, concerning, but then again, as I said, we have seen many challenges in life. In some ways you are battle hardened, and fortunately my son is relatively young. Touch wood, he's out of it. So it was difficult, but yes, we lived through it.
Now, Aditya Birla Group, very large conglomerate, one of India's best and the brightest conglomerates, if I may say, if I could describe ABG as a person. And this COVID crisis would have brought out the best in you, given the kind of challenges you are facing. So tell us briefly about that before we turn the attention to questions that are beginning to bubble up.
You mean personally or as a group?
As a group, and how you are inspired to serve, to bring out the best in yourself to take on the challenges.
It was a tremendous spirit. We created many communities. We created a community of doctors. We created a community of what we call as Corona warriors. We set up a code red call center support system that we earlier had to provide all Corona information and support. I booked an entire floor in anticipation of a private hospital's about 12 beds to support employees and families in Mumbai. And the spirit was tremendous. I sent out a letter to all my employees saying, look, any part of India, if we need a bed, emergency, we won't trouble you. Do you have connectivity where you could help us to access a bed? Many, many employees wrote back saying, in this small town, this city, I can help you. My uncle is here, there. The spirit of one Aditya Birla Group, one ABG as we call it, was completely alive and available there. I was interested in a job to buy 50 crores or more worth PPE and masks for Government of India. I leveraged my entire network as a service of the country to do it. All procurement managers in different businesses, different parts of the world, from China, Korea, Malaysia, were helping me to procure masks and PPEs for government in India. So I think in many respects, the food packet distribution in factories to lorry drivers, others moving quickly to digital mode so that contact that we reduce in many occasions. So I think there was a tremendous display of esprit de corps, the teamwork, the larger purpose, supporting communities. We had housing colonies in factory locations. These suddenly became island sanctuaries, protected sanctuaries. And we realized the benefit of our housing colonies because we could run our factories wherever we wanted, unless there was a kind of restriction on us. So it was a fantastic process, unless there was a government lockdown or there was no demand, we otherwise ran factories wherever we could. And our people showed team sizes were smaller, people worked longer, some of them stayed in the factories. I think it has been a great story of people coming together.
How wonderful. And I also want to thank you. There was a help I required from you when you had nominated people for our global program. They could not turn up at the last minute, but you were very fair and considerate and made sure that whatever commitments were made by the group towards this program were honored. So I really thank you, Santrupt, for living that. And
as you said, commitment along with speed is also a value of that company, so but yes, most companies, and I would urge everybody listening not to judge people and companies in a certain light when they are under stress, because the stress of economy is real on many companies and many people, a lot of debate on downsizing. But I tell people that don't judge people when they're acting under stress. Judge them in normal times if you wish to judge.
Okay, now turning the attention to questions from the audience. So Shreya Dara, who's one of our students, is asking, you are a big company with so many employees with diverse backgrounds. How is HR engaging employees to bring in greater employee experience digitally during the pandemic?
Well, I think many things many people are doing, we are also doing. First of all, particularly in a city like Mumbai, for example, we have said to people that they can come to office as they feel convenient, if they wish to come. We are providing private buses for people to come if they wish to come who do not have private transport. We kind of transformed every work into digital virtual mode. We have transformed entire investment into our learning initiative into virtual mode, like you are doing, and transforming every course into a digital program, and in fact, 3.2 million units of learning were consumed by our employees during the last 4 or 5 months, which was amazing, actually. There's a Gyanodaya virtual app, which is about our corporate university. 33,000 employees downloaded that, to access the learning offerings that we have. We have had many social engagement activities, between employees, children and parents involved as well, all on virtual mode. In factories, in offices, everywhere. My financial services business held an entire recognition program on a digital platform, fully. It's like you telecast an Oscar or, a Filmfare Award. It was a live telecast about a virtual function, where on a virtual theater, the CEO was speaking and, awards were being given away. So, first of all, we didn't want to bring down employee engagement to the level of only pizza parties or Rose Day or whatever day. We believe that true engagement comes from number one, challenging job, learning, connectivity and inspiration from managers, and a sense of belonging, that the organization cares. And also that the organization cares not just for employees, but cares for community and people beyond. And they saw that during this pandemic, we did not drop the ball on any of these counts. And all of that we were doing virtually, for example. So I think that inspired people a lot. And it's not me saying, a lot of employees wrote to us how they felt reassured about the steps we had taken for the well-being of theirs and their families. We have had occasions where people went through emotional trauma, and we had a set of counselors available to have conversation with them virtually to help them through that phase of crisis. So, a lot of challenges we went through, but I think, as I said to Anil earlier, that we came together to solve every time whatever was thrown at us and keep the engagement going. Thank you for the question.
Wonderful. Jabi Cherian, who used to head IBM in India and now is working with Sadhguruji.
I know very well. Hi, JB. How are you?
Yes. So he's asking that isn't it time we stopped looking at our employees as resources but as possibilities? And should we not be naming our HR departments as human possibilities departments? Because so there are several other things in that, but that's the main question.
Well, I think a long time I read that a rose still smells a rose, call it by whatever name. So I don't think labels are important really. What matters is the spirit with which you look at your people. The source and resource debate has been around for long. And to be honest, when you focus on people's creativity, innovation, their general moral sense of purpose and ethics, when you're relying on, then actually you are relying on their innate goodness as human beings, and which is the source of everything. And I think when you apply certain skills and education and knowledge, they become resource for a specific purpose. But I think their orientation of delivering some productive value as a resource, behind it is the original innate humanness and all that goes with that humanness, the sense of morality, purpose, ethics, creativity, ingenuity, empathy. I think all that force enables their ability to create value. So, it is a question of end and means and how you treat them. If you are able to treat them both ways, perhaps human beings believe to be complete in all senses. I believe if you always look at them as what you call a source, maybe some of them may feel incomplete, that whether they are making a tangible contribution. But when somebody works hard enough, applying his knowledge and skill to produce a beautiful ingot in aluminium or a bag of concrete cement, Ultratech cement, which with you produce your houses, or a beautiful piece of garment called Louis Philippe that you buy in a store, I think the person sees an expression of himself or herself in that product and object. I think that creates a sense of accomplishment. So I think instead of that debate of what we should call them, I would focus rather on how do we harness both aspects of human beings. And I think creating space and opportunity for both those aspects to coexist and create something beautiful in life, I think is what should be the fulfillment of people, I think, JB. Thank you.
Roland Sullivan, who is a global, organizational development consultant. You perhaps may have heard of his name, Roland Sullivan.
Yes.
So Roland is on the platform and he's asking, so what advice do you have to deal with climate change? What should companies be doing to contribute to this global problem?
Well, I think the first thing companies have to do is to internalize and accept that this challenge is real and not hypothetical or some fancy ideological school that is talking about it. I think honest acceptance that we are dealing with a problem is the first step in solving the problem and contributing to addressing it. So I think whether it is a board level discussion, senior management team discussion, creating a general awareness amongst employees about waste of resources, natural resources, the issues of climate change, pollution, waste, and the different dimensions of it. I think there's a degree of massive education is needed around sustainability in all forms of it. That is certainly one part of it. Second part of it is actively working through investment in right technology, awareness, partnership to solve some of the problems where they individually could be contributors. Obviously, we need to manufacture chemicals. We would generate effluent, but we need to manage those in a manner that would be consistent with sustainable living. So therefore, making the right investment at the right time, encouraging people to raise the flag on how to solve problems. For example, water consumption. In our personal lives and in our manufacturing processes, in even services called restaurants or hotels, there's a tremendous amount of usage of water, and we all, with little degree of consciousness, can bring down the per person or per event or per manufacturing consumption of water. I think heightening those issues in the psyche of employees and partners, those who are suppliers, those who are customers, I think all of us can do many things, and I'm very glad that the corporate world is woken up to it. I don't think in the short term corporates can do enough to address historical wrongs that we have created. But even if the current generation of entrepreneurs, business people, policymakers learn to work together and accept this problem as a genuine human problem that exists and contribute meaningfully in a committed way and sincerely over a period of time, I personally believe that a large amount of problems we can solve perhaps.
Right. Shivani Bhatnagar, who's one of our students, is asking, what steps is the Aditya Birla Group taking to ensure gender diversity, especially on the shop floor?
Well, I think one of the things we got to understand is gender diversity in India particularly, is my personal belief, cannot be created simply by corporates creating space at the workplace. It's a challenge of changing social mindset as well. We were running several skill development centers in parts of India. And one of our fundamental challenge was to encourage parents to allow their girl children to come and get skill development training in our skill institutions. My colleagues who were in charge of that, they had to literally, sometimes in collaboration with our social workers and community workers, went house to house, explaining. And in fact, in Chhattisgarh, I remember somewhere we had to bring parents to our skill development center to show how girl children were learning new skills, including electronics, this, that, and all, and how life transforming has been for some of them who have got employment, to encourage them to allow the girls to come there. So I think we need a social revolution in terms of role of girl child in society, life, showcase success, demonstrate the issue of security, safety, demonstrate the issue of social acceptance of different kinds of professions where young women are going and doing well and successful. So I think getting on the shop floor, women, we do, of course, we recruit apprentices, young engineering trainees. A lot of our factories today are getting Hindalco's, if I remember, in Renukut, my metals company, last batch of engineering trainees, 50% were girls. We never had that, We have been actually training male managers to understand on shop floor how to accept girls, as co-workers, because that experience did not exist historically. We have been talking to older managers, identifying, or even workers, identifying who have girl children of their own, who are grown up, to tell them that, look, what would you expect their life to be? So, at a multiple level, we are working to make sure that we prepare the psyche of co-workers, managers, enlist the help of unions, talk to parents, create an atmosphere of safety. So a lot of things we are doing at different level. But I must say that manufacturing in rural India, operations like mining, will still take a long time to really have sizable number of young women working there. We all need to collaboratively work to make that happen. It has to be an act of commitment And we need to be prepared for a relatively longer haul in that regard. And I don't expect magical turnaround in that overnight.
R.R. Nair, whom you know well, who's
Hi, RR, how are you? My
yes,
regards to you.
yes. So RR is asking a question based on the lessons you have learned so far. What changes do we need to make to our organization's culture and mindset?
I think it would depend on different organizations, depending on what life stage they are in and what kind of business they are in. But I think one mindset that we need to kind of create is that life is no longer going to be the same as we used to know it. And future is no longer a distant future, what we call as future. It is literally rushing towards us. And I think, therefore, helping people to embrace, welcome, and accept change all the time and redefine themselves and their capabilities, how to adapt in this changing world rapidly, I think is one change that we need. And particularly those businesses and organizations for a long time that have been stable or have been stable markets, regulatory environments, they sometimes find it hard to believe that things could overnight change. And today, what we find that things are changing overnight, well before we realize. You find that rural women are switching to digital mode of payment. Illiterate people are gone digital in terms of their financial transaction. It is an amazing change that is happening out there. And we need to perhaps more focus on our upper middle management and senior management more to say that we may have been born in a stable era, but we are living in a very chaotic era where things are changing more. So therefore, how to develop comfort with rapid change, continuous change, and willingness to embrace that change more willingly, happily, with a spirit of adventure and learning. I think those are the kind of mindset changes I would think we need, RR. But drop me a mail to tell me what you think about it.
Bimlendra Jha, who used to be heading as managing director, the Ambuja part, and earlier a veteran of Tata Steel, he's asking a question: what are the three gifts or positives of COVID-19 to the world of business?
Well, I think the obvious one is transformation to digital work and work from anywhere. I think that is one. Second is rapid innovation and adaptability to cope with new circumstances. Everybody is improvising, innovating, and doing it. And last is perhaps acute search for efficiencies, because cash flows have been constrained and demand has gone down, and therefore continuous search for efficiency, how to do things more productively. I think all of these things have been rapidly fast forwarded for people to think and act on. And I think those three have been gifts. And personally, for me, I was telling Anil that I've lost 10 kilos in the last 6 months, simply because there's no travel, no eating junk food, sweet stalls were closed, and I could perhaps for the first time do 6 months of exercise uninterrupted myself, and I lost 10 kilos. So, a lot of people have got personal benefits of learning a new skill at home, perhaps connecting with their family more, looking after their own personal well-being more. I think there are all kinds of good things that have happened. And I think it is important for us to, while be careful and look at all the downsides of it, but we need to also seize the opportunity that it presents and transform ourselves personally and our organizations as well.
Wonderful. Xavier, who used to head the Chanel business in India and was an executive in residence in Soil, he is based in France. He is looking at your website and adityabirla.com and the leadership team. And he's wondering, what could you do to get more women at the apex level in the organization? And he's saying, perhaps it might require leadership from you, Mrs. Rajshri Birla and others. This is just his view, to sort of actually manifest many more talented women into the top leadership of ABG, and he's wondering whether you are conscious of it, whether there is a program like that in place.
Well, very much so, Javier. Thank you for that. When I joined the Aditya Birla Group 25 years ago, in our management cadre at that time, we had 0.01% women. Today, I have 14% women. That's a long journey. Number two, today, I have at least two CEOs, a CFO of a publicly listed company. If you go to individual company websites, you will see a lot more women there in the senior management, not necessarily in the group leadership at the moment. My procurement head in Novalis in US, my service head in Carbon Black in the US, my CFO in Aditya Birla Capital in India, Pantaloons, which is a branded products company in India, the CEO of it, Sangeeta Pendurkar, Shama Shauki, who's managing director of Alexandria Carbon Black, or Birla Carbon Egypt, as we call it now. You would see a range of women just below this level. And all of this has happened of growing women in the pipeline. And I think the next frontier will be the kind of group leadership. Earlier we never had women, never retained women, and all of those battles we have conquered now. And the second tier to the group leadership, which is about 15 or so people, you would find a lot of women, and now next frontier would be that for me. And we are working on that.
Yeah. Nelson D'Souza is asking a question. It's, you know Nelson as well.
Nelson, so, it must be pretty late in Australia.
Yes.
You should be sleeping now.
Yeah. So he says, over 25 years, you have successfully transformed the human side of ABG. What, in your view, were your leadership challenges, and what is your unfinished agenda?
Well, one unfinished agenda, as Javier pointed out from Chanel, is about getting more diversity at the top and more diversity of all kinds. There are a lot of other aspects of diversity that we need to bring into the organization. That is one part of it. Second is, I think, to build rich leadership talent in all aspects of the organization, much more than we have been able to do in human resources. That's an unfinished agenda. And I think the third part of it is to perhaps grow Aditya Birla Group even more globally than we have done in the last 25 years. I think all of these agenda, and there is a lot more unfinished agenda, Nelson. Maybe being in Australia more, we used to have two mines there, which we divested. We don't have it now, but perhaps maybe Australia is a new frontier that's waiting to happen. Nelson, look out for it.
Thank you. Santrupt, I just want to thank you profusely on everybody's behalf. There are so many more questions. But here are the things I learned from you and with you today, Santrupt. One, the source of the greatest satisfaction in life when one is of service to others. You always remember that life is worth it when you were able to enable somebody else to realize their potential, help them when they were in difficulty. And your story of helping the visually challenged person senior to you, and the dilemma that you went through and what you did at that moment will stay for a long time. That image will stay for a long time. So thank you. The second thing you talked about is that amongst all the amazing things that have been done collectively in ABG, what has again given you the maximum satisfaction and joy is when people have connected together as one ABG, when people have convened together and co-discovered the answers. The spirit that you described of your Friday meeting with the CHROs to keep a finger on the pulse of the organization to say, how do we co-create what is emerging in the future? So not just saying what needs to be done, this what you called as bifocal. I think that's the biggest challenge because organizations struggle, including we in soil struggle. How do we create soil 2.0 when soil 1.0 is taking so much of attention of ourselves, right? So thank you for that wisdom. The third aspect that you talked about You chose to describe some parts of your personal life, and I know there were some other aspects you chose today not to share, but I am privy to that. I would say the way you, Alka, your son and daughter came together as a family to take on whatever life's challenges, and perhaps what, how you and your sister face that. I think when you are truly having the power of unconditional love and you source that, I think the power of love is the biggest power which overcomes huge challenges in life. And thank you for manifesting that love. And that's something I appeal to everybody on this channel. When we are united in love, we can rise in love and we can take on so many challenges. So thank you for pointing that out. Santrupt, you were very candid in your responses. You never tried to say things which were just for the sake of showing something. But that's why you have always been authentic. You've always talked about the issues where also things didn't go right, like what happened in Egypt. So thank you for saying that, and thank you for being like that. And the very last point I want to say is the fact that you have chosen this time in the pandemic to really take responsibility, reduce weight, invoke the younger Santrupt to manifest is something very, very wonderful. And I join you in that because I too have lost 7 kilos in the last few months and I'm enjoying myself for that. So thank you very much. And thank you, Santrupt, for being with us this evening.
Thanks so much for having me, Anil. And I wish everyone safe stay. And thank you for joining me on this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Santrupt.